Welcome to the Dolby Music Community Sessions. I'm Ben Givarz with the Music Partnerships team at Dolby Laboratories based in Los Angeles. And for this session, we have two special guests joining Greg and myself to share a very cool new tool. Mixers Nathaniel Reichman and Zach Szydlo are here to demonstrate Immersive Master Pro, a software application for batch processing and management of files in the Dolby Atmos music ecosystem. So this is a great tool and huge time saver that allows for quick re-render processing, loudness analysis and correction, and sample rate conversion in batches of your Atmos files, among other very cool processes. Nathaniel is a co-founder of the new software company Immersive Machines. He's also a producer and mixer with over 20 years of experience in the audio industry. Is the immersive music mixer at Dubway Studios and a re-recording mixer at Beat Street NYC. And he will be here along with Zach Szydlo, who is a multi-platinum audio engineer specializing in Atmos mixing and mastering for the likes of Dua Lipa, BTS, Future and Metro Boomin, Demi Lovato and the Rolling Stones, and he'll share how he uses Immersive Master Pro as a key piece of his workflow. So again, stay tuned for that conversation and demo with Nathaniel and Zach. Be sure to add your questions here for them to answer on the session. As always, from Miami, Greg Stryke Chin is here with part 3 of our Creation in Dolby Atmos Pro Tips. Greg will share how you can leverage the Stereo Direct feature to derive a stereo mix from your Dolby Atmos mix in a quick, easy, and efficient manner. So one mix, 2 deliverables with Greg to round out his great 3-part series. Of course, you can catch parts 1 and 2 in our last 2 sessions, which cover setup, composition, and arrangement, and how to easily add these pieces to your workflow today. So add your questions for Greg to answer, and that's coming right up. Also, on the topics of creating in Atmos and Stereo Direct, there is a new knowledge base document at our Pro site called Dolby Atmos Music Creation and Production that outlines the new features in the Dolby Atmos music production toolset and offers best practices for creation through to delivery, including low latency monitoring and recording, best practices for headphone and speaker-based workflows, use of virtual instruments, and of course, how to leverage the Stereo Direct feature, which is a separate re-render and monitoring layout that offers you a ton of creative freedom, can save you time, and does not downmix through 5.1, so it's direct to stereo right in the renderer, as we've been sharing. You can have a look at that and all of the great resources available at the knowledge base, which is at professional.dolby.com. Of course, there are a ton of articles there on working with the renderer, the album assembler, various DAWs and room setup. There's FAQs and a user forum where you can ask questions and interact with Dolby's engineers for support. So huge shout out to Bennett, Adam, and the team for all of the great work they do at the Pro site in support of the creative community and the music industry. From there, of course, you can link to the resources at Dolby Creator Lab, formerly known as Dolby Institute. So yes, the website and the great team there have rebranded as the Dolby Creator Lab, still with the mission to educate, inspire, and empower the next generation of content creators. At the Creator Lab website, you'll find the free Dolby Atmos Essentials Learning course, the quick start and deep dive tutorial videos for mixing, and the Dolby Atmos Music Accelerator videos with Brandon and Maggie, taking you all the way through from setup to delivery. Excellent resources there. Also, the Dolby Creator Talks podcasts have dropped a run of music episodes exploring classic albums reimagined in Dolby Atmos with mix engineers and producers such as Ken Scott and Emre exploring David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, Rich Chicky exploring the Rush catalog, Ryan Uliate on Tom Petty, and Bob Clearmountain and producer Rhett Davies going through Roxy Music and Brian Ferry's work in Dolby Atmos. So be sure to check those out on your favorite podcasting platforms or Dolby's YouTube channel. And a big shout out to Glenn, John, Amanda, Brandon, and Michael Coleman and the rest of the great team at Dolby Creator Lab. Scan the QR code on screen now. On the left, scan and scroll down to opt into our mailing list to stay up to date with the events and tools happening around the Dolby Atmos music world. And on the right-hand side, scan and grab the latest versions of the Dolby Atmos renderer and album assembler tools. Also, if you haven't had a chance to check out our music community sessions live from Nashville replays, you can find them on our YouTube playlist and our community sessions homepage. So these sessions, which we did in collaboration with AES Nashville section, East Iris Studios, and auto partner Rivian, were held over 2 days at East Iris Studios and feature conversations with mixers Kevin Reeves and Dustin Richardson exploring stereo direct, a conversation with BMG's mixer Jeff Huskins on his stereo direct and mastering template, a great session on mix and mastering and the relationship between the two in Atmos with our friend mixer Jeff Balding and our friend mastering engineer Andrew Mendelson from Georgetown Masters. It was a great weekend. We kicked off the session with an ecosystem overview featuring Dolby's head of music partnerships, Christine Thomas, sharing the latest momentum and updates from throughout the music ecosystem. So check those out at our YouTube channel and our music community sessions live from Nashville page on our music community session site. All right, in last month's session, we had a great chat with Brandon Nales and Obi Brown from Dolby Creator Labs sharing the Music Accelerator program and new website. We also featured a conversation and demonstration of Sony C for remote file management and mix approvals with Sony's David Rosen. Be sure to check that out on our site. And this month, we explore Immersive Master Pro with Nathaniel Reichman and Zach Szydlo. That's coming right up following Greg Stryke Chin's Pro Mix tips for creating an Atmos and Stereo Direct. Be sure to submit your questions for the guys to answer. All right, it's Greg Stryke Chin from his studio in Miami with his Pro tips, which have been focused on creating original music in Atmos and Stereo Direct. And here we are at part 3 of your 3-part series showing how you can leverage the Stereo Direct feature to derive a stereo mix from your Dolby Atmos mix in a quick, easy, and efficient manner. So it's one mix, 2 deliverables. Take it away, Greg.
So as you guys might remember, first couple of parts, we set up a template and we started doing some music creation in Dolby Atmos. So making decisions and writing from the inception in low latency with internal rendering, using virtual instruments, using audio, capturing some audio. And then in part 2, obviously that is the kind of the mix phase. That's a phase that, again, I'd mentioned that most people are really used to kind of working in. And I talked a little bit about just a couple of little best practices, specifically anything that you've got in virtual instruments. Make sure you go ahead and print those to audio and continue making your mix decisions. And now for part 3, we actually have our Atmos file. I have it here loaded in the Dolby Atmos renderer. So for this one, I'm going to work in the renderer because I thought, let's go ahead and actually show what that looks like in the renderer. Now, if you're in Pro Tools, you do have the ability to leverage Stereo Direct there as well. Hopefully this will come to more DAW partners over time. So I figured it'd be best to kind of show it in the Dolby Atmos renderer. So I already have a Dolby Atmos, an ADM of that track loaded. To just do really quick playback here so you can hear it. All right. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we want to show just how easy it is to get your stereo file directly from an Atmos file. So I'm going to go ahead, and even though I've showed this in a previous session, I want to go ahead and just show it again very quickly. So we're going to go to our input and master menu, and we're going to go to the re-renders page. So we've pulled that up, and what we want to do, I want to go ahead and add Stereo Direct to my re-renders. So I'm just going to add a re-render, and let's go ahead and we're going to choose the 2.0 Direct, and we're going to add that re-render, and then click Accept. And then now it's as simple as I've got my ADM loaded, and I'm going to go to my File menu, Export Audio, click Re-renders, and here we go. This is now going to pop up our export re-renders. You can see that I've got a 5.1 and my 2.0 Direct. I'm going to uncheck the 5.1 re-render. We're just going to have the 2.0 Direct checked. And it's going to ask me what the file name is. I'm just going to put stereo at the end here. I'll just say 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and push it to the desktop. For the file type, we're going to leave it as multi-channel interleaved, and we're going to do the entire master. So make sure that our 2.0 direct is what's checked. We're going to grab all the beds and objects, and I'll go back and show you quickly that you can adjust some trims if you need to, but go ahead and try it out as is. We're going to go ahead and export, and there it is. We now have a stereo file ready to go. It's that simple. Okay, so we've exported our stereo 2.0 WAV file, and I'm going to bring it up in the album assembler just so you can kind of see it and hear it back and forth. But before I do that, I just quickly wanted to make sure here are the trim and down mix controls. So you can see that you do have access to your trims for your surround heights, front and back balance for 2.0 direct. So if you needed to make some adjustments, you can do that. Now, here we are in the album assembler, and you can see that I've got my ADM loaded as well as the stereo direct file. So I'm just going to play back a little bit. We're not worried about volume right now. This is not mixed. This is not prepared. But I just wanted to make sure I kind of show you and be able to go back and forth. So we'll start off with the ADM, and then we're going to switch to the stereo. There you go. Back to Atmos, and then over to stereo. So it's a really high-level look at and listen at Stereo Direct, but it is that simple. Now, again, making sure that you do have access to those trims if you need them, but being able to derive my stereo mix directly from the Atmos mix is certainly making life a lot easier for me, and I hope it will for you as well. So with that is the end of part 3. I hope you all are jumping in and experimenting and playing, having a good play with creating an Atmos and then deriving your stereo mix from your Dolby Atmos ADM. I hope you're enjoying it. I know I am. And with that, I'll say thank you, and back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Greg. That was awesome. Wow. In the lab, in the studio with Greg Stryke Chin. You've seen it all, folks, from inception through to delivery. So if you have any questions about any pieces of this process, be sure to add your question in big marker with your name, and we'll be sure to answer those. All right, very happy to welcome to the Music Community Sessions mixer, producer, and co-founder of Immersive Machines, LLC, and Immersive Master Pro, Nathaniel Reichman. Welcome, Nathaniel. Thanks so much for doing this with us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. It's a pleasure. So we're going to get into an overview and a demonstration of Immersive Master Pro in just a moment. But if you would please just share a little bit about your background, which is interesting because it includes film and TV work and classical and electronic music production and mixing as well, right? So it sounds like you've had a pretty fun path to get to where you are today.
It has been a long path. And I guess the short version is when I started my career, I was working in advertising, which covers a lot of different things, right? And then as I moved forward, we started working in TV programming. So I've done a lot of television post-production. And I always had a hand in the music community producing classical albums. And so classical music was a big part of my kind of entry into the music world. And that's what got me my first Grammy nomination, Ben, if I'm bragging. So there we go. Yeah.
Nice. So fast forward to, 2015 or so, what was your introduction to Dolby Atmos and how did you get started? You had already been doing some immersive mixing prior to that, correct?
Yeah. So to put it in context, in the year 2000, I was working at a performance space in New York City that wanted to hang speakers on the ceiling and all around the room to create a 3D sound experience, right? And it was very difficult and very expensive to find software and hardware that was going to create this experience for us. And we were talking about an installation. We weren't even talking about something that that would be a consumer format, right? So, and I've been working with a lot of contemporary classical artists over my career, and it always comes up, which is the idea that you want to put the listener inside the music. So I've worked with composers like Philip Glass and John Luther Adams. And especially with John, he's very keen on saying, I want the choir to be behind me, and I want the brass to be in the balconies to my left and right. So this is something that we were dealing with in the 2000s, and we were making DVD video 5.1 mixes of the music at that point in time. So, when the concept for Atmos became clear in the sort of public media around 2012, I guess that's when Brave came out, right? At that point in time, I thought, well, that's great, but it seems like it's really focused on film and it seems expensive and exclusive, and I'm not even sure I can bring it to music, right? But as soon as we were able to bring it to music, even just a little bit, I'm like, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for this for decades. Let's go. And I was actually, I was working in the format before we had streaming options, only because even if I never imagined the streaming thing was going to work out, but I knew that if we started working in the format in the music community early, we would have this high-end way of capturing and mixing, even if nobody heard it, right? We would say, we did this thing. It was really cool. You got to come over and hear it, right? So, when you fast forward to 2020 and we get the first streaming companies like Tidal and Amazon and then Apple coming on, that was a big green light, for what we were doing. I will say though, I started working seriously in the Atmos format in 2017. And that was because the binaural headphone experience was really great for kind of high-end podcasts. Podcasts were exploding at that time, and we had clients that wanted to create a binaural headphone experience. And we were doing that without calling it Atmos, but we were using the early production suite to do that. So that's me skipping through the decades, Ben.
You've got experience mixing in headphones for the binaural experience, different types of music. You were using the production suite before, the renderer kind of became one tool. So you've seen the evolution of the format. You mentioned it being, distributed onto streaming services, which now there are 20. So you've seen how far it's come.
Yeah.
You're also in your home studio, right, which is enabled for Dolby Atmos. So I know you're affiliated with a couple of different spaces, but share what you've put together there in your home studio.
I think a lot of people had a similar COVID story, which was that early 2020 work was a little dead. And I thought, well, I don't know if this immersive thing is going to happen, but I got some free time. And so this room, and you can't see it on the camera, this room has very high ceilings and it's pretty wide. And so I installed 7.1.4 early on. And there was some early Dolby documentation, and I kind of jerry-rigged it. And I got it in the zone. And at the time, it wasn't as well calibrated as it is now. But that was a great use of time. Being on a ladder that summer and installing the ceiling speakers was a really, really good use of time. And then it gave me confidence too, because this is my project studio. This is my private project studio. It gave me confidence that I could build a mix in this room and then take it to some of the better rooms that I work in New York City. And that's, we've talked about this, Ben. I do mixes at Beat Street and at Dubway and at Engine Room Audio, just to name check a few of the great studios in New York.
Yeah, nice. And so you're able to rely on translation from your room and your headphone mixes to your speakers in your room and out to other studios around New York City and beyond. So that's great. And you've now added Pro Audio software developer to your list of titles and experience. Yes, with Immersive Master Pro. Can you tell us a little bit about your team and the background of this project, and then we'll get into the tool?
It wasn't really ever my intention to start a software company. I'll tell you where we were. A few years ago, we were doing a lot of work for live events, live EDM events, right? So it was like a festival weekend, multiple DJs playing multiple stages, and it was a lot of content. And it wasn't dissimilar from recording a live classical concert, in that you may have a performance which is an hour and a half long, and you're going to mix that in Atmos. And then only late in the process would you know exactly where the track markers were in that, right? It's different than mixing an album where you do one song at a time. You're doing one long live continuous performance, and we mix all 90 minutes. We send that out for review. Great, it sounds good. Okay, we're going to cut it up into 35 tracks. So one evening, I was flipping through the back of the manual for the Dolby Atmos conversion tool, and I said, hey, we can run this with a command line. So we built a Python script in-house, and this was at Dubway. We built a little Python script, and the Python script was taped together with a terminal command, which was taped together with something else. And it was kind of a disaster, but it sort of worked, right? And we used this for about a year. And then I met Bob Brown, who is our head software developer, and he looked at that and said, Nathaniel, we can do a lot better. Right. So we don't have to use this junky Python script. And so that was the beginning of Immersive Machines, and that was the beginning of Immersive Master Pro, where we could say, okay, well, let's actually build an app that does all the functions that we need in the studio just for ourselves. So we very much built Immersive Master Pro to suit our needs because we were super busy and we were adding features to it for us, really. That's what we were doing.
And it does so much more than just splitting apart long
yes,
ADM files.
That was the first feature. It does a lot more than that.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so that kind of helped you add some more of the other functions to it in terms of batch processing and managing loudness and conversion. As you were putting the team together, what were some of the early goals of the tool? What were you kind of setting out to do as you were, preparing for the next iteration?
Well, I should back up a little bit. I should back up a moment and put this in context. If you go into a busy recording studio 10 years ago, right, there's a lot of files flying around. So somebody's going to send a stereo mix and an MP3, and you're going to get a wave of this or that, or somebody you're working with is going to send you something. So you need a way, while you're working, you need a way to kind of audition all that material and wrap your hands, get your hands around it, know what you've got, and a way to do that in a place that is not your main workstation, because you're working on something else. You're working in Pro Tools, you're working in Logic, or whatever your platform is. You kind of need a management tool. So we've been through a lot of these kind of audio batch processing file management tools. It became really obvious to me as we entered the Atmos world, we have these new file formats, right? We have the Dolby ADMs, we've got the .Atmos, Dolby Atmos master files, right? And those are just a couple. There was even more than that. So it was really obvious that we needed a software tool that could do all of those utility management operations with the new file formats, right? As recently as a couple of years ago, how many places can you open an ADM? Not too many, right? It's very, very limited where you can open an ADM. So that was one of the goals of Immersive Master Pro, was to be that catch-all utility that's always running in the background. Buddy of mine sends me a mix in the middle of the day, I can throw it in there, check it out, and not stop what I'm doing, right? And not unload my master file from my renderer or get another renderer or whatever it is. It just makes it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in addition to being versatile, I mean, it's accomplishing several like formerly very time consuming tasks that are also very important in terms of preparation for distribution or, different types of file management. So well done. Do you want to share with us kind of a presentation of how it works and a demonstration? Cool. So the tool has two main modes: edit mode and batch mode. And we're going to take a look at batch mode first.
Yeah, so when you launch Immersive Master Pro, this is a utility application. It's very simple. There's edit mode on the left-hand side and there's batch mode on the right-hand side. And I'm going to cover both of these, but let's take a look at batch first. I've got a folder of a bunch of Atmos master files. Some of them are ADMs, some of them are .Atmos master files. So if I just take this one here, here's a 96K ADM of a mix I did. And I drag and drop that onto, let me resort that. There we go. I drag and drop that onto batch mode. Immersive Master Pro will load your ADM file, tell you the name, it'll tell you what application created the file, and then it'll give you all this metadata up here in the corner. So it was 24-bit, it's 96K, here's the time code start, duration, etc. Now, if you notice, these dots here are flashing. And the reason they're flashing is because in settings, I have automatically compute loudness checked on. And so it's whenever you drag and drop anything onto the application and that's checked on, this will flash and it will give you the integrated loudness and the true peak loudness. And these measurements are designed to be, tightly aligned with what the Dolby renderer is doing, so you can quickly look and find out what's my integrated loudness, what's my true peak loudness of this master file. Now, the strength of Immersive Master Pro is not just loading one file. We can load a bunch of files at the same time, and you can let the application just chew on all these files. So I can say, okay, I want the .atmos, I want this ADM, this folder's got another .atmos, I want to dump all these in here, and I want it to do all the loudness analysis. So I can take these, drag and drop, and there we go. And now, I think this is a pretty unique function because you have multiple master files loaded of different sampling rates inside the same application. And here we have the integrated loudness for that first master file, and then the dB true peak loudness of that first master file as well.
Loading single or multiple files, and as that analysis is happening in the background, the user's not gated from continuing to move forward if they want to go ahead and process and actually do a batch process, or does that analysis have to be completed first?
No, you can move forward. Yeah, you can move forward, but you won't have. I'm going to show how the gain functions work, and if you process before you've done gain changes, you won't benefit from having done any gain changes. That's all. So here, while we're having the loudness calculation going on, I could show you how process works. And what we're doing here is you can option click on the side here, all the master files on or off, or you can choose a couple if you want. And if I want to choose a couple here, and I hit process, it will do batch re-rendering for you. So you can make ADMs, and you can make any one of these output formats at 96K or 48K. And then obviously for the kind of astute, sort of technically astute viewer, you'll see if you have a mixed batch of master files, some that are 48 and some that are 96, we don't actually allow you to upsample to 96. It's only the 96s will be processed at 96. But if you want to downsample, sample rate convert from 96 down to 48, this is a great place to do it, and you can do it in batch mode, and it makes the whole process of moving a music project in 96 down to 48 for distribution a lot faster. We have a lot of output formats you'll be familiar with, including the new Stereo Direct from Dolby, 5.1, 7.1.4, but we also have something you probably haven't seen before in an Atmos-enabled application, which is that we do mono as well. And we do mono from the stereo down mix. And then just to kind of, look under the hood a little bit, if you go to settings, the mono render gain reduction is the amount of reduction you'll get when those two channels are mixed down to mono. And depending on your program material, you may want to set that for -3 or -6, but that's getting kind of geeky. So, all right. So if I select all of these master files, and we're getting loudness here on the very last one coming in right now, you'll notice in settings that my integrated level target is -18. So for the music mixers, you'll be familiar with that because a lot of the streaming platforms are saying, hey, your integrated loudness for a music master that is going to Tidal or Apple Music or Amazon or any of the other 17 that Ben mentions, you want to shoot it for 18 or lower. So I have in preferences, I have it set for 18 right here. And what you can do is if you look at the integrated levels here in this list, you'll see that a couple of these files are over the -18 limit. What I can do if I go to settings and I choose autocorrect loudness independently, and I select all my master files and right click or control click, autocorrect loudness says, hey, these two files are illegal and we're going to change the level to make them legal. So it took that file and dropped it a little over 3 dB, took this one and dropped it 0.82. So out of all your highlighted files, it's going to find the ones that are out of spec, and it will automatically do a gain change for you and put them into spec so that when you do your process and you go out, you'll be at the game level, at the integrated level you want to be running at. Just recently when we were at AAS, we had a lot of astute, sort of smart people looking at this, and they said, well, if I'm a mastering engineer and I'm working on an album, I don't want just one track to go down. I want, because if the album is already mastered and the relative levels between tracks has already been worked out, right? You've got a whole album experience, and one of those tracks is way too hot or a little bit too hot, you're going to have to scale the whole album. So let me zero these out and I'll show you this other function here, where I change the autocorrect loudness to equally, which is it equally scales all loaded masters. So this is kind of our mastering engineer mode. So if I put it in equally and we let those two recalculate. So now I've zeroed out all the gains and we can see that these are the two master files which are higher than the -18 loudness target. Because I've set the preferences to equally, I can select all the loaded masters, control click or right click, autocorrect, and everything is taken down by an equal amount. So what you've done is you've preserved the relative levels of all the loaded masters. So I wouldn't call it a mastering tool because we don't do mastering, but I think this is a great pre-flight tool on your way to distribution, which is to say, here's an album. It might be a little bit out of spec. We can fix the whole album for you without making you remake your Atmos master files. It's a pretty quick process for that. And obviously, the gain change that you see there is what will be applied on all the outputs as you go out.
Yeah, this is fantastic. So yeah, one quick question in terms of any of the changes, the gain changes that happen. The gain is applied to the original source file. Is that now baked into the file, or is that metadata that lives within your batch process?
We don't modify. If you drag and drop a file into Immersive Master Pro, we never modify that file, right? That file remains untouched. So when you drag and drop a file into the app and you see the integrated level, if we've made a change here, until you hit process, that's a virtual level. So Immersive Master Pro is saying, when you hit process, this file will now have, after you've made a file, it'll have an integrated level of -23.35, only after you've made that ADM. So we're not going to modify your source files, only your output files will be modified exactly. Yeah, that would be a little dangerous if we did it the other way. I'll show you edit mode, unless there's something I haven't covered here in batch mode. This is a data application, so you can sort by file name, but I also like doing things like sorting by level. If you have a lot of files loaded here, you can quickly see which ones are the hot ones by sorting the list that way. So we have a few kind of housekeeping functions that are built into the application. So I'm going to exit batch mode and show you edit mode, which was the first thing that we did before when we started working on this project. To properly demonstrate edit mode, let me show you the workflow problem that we had before we made the app. Let's take a trip over to Pro Tools right now. In Pro Tools, this is a live album, right? And I've made a mix. And this is continuous music here. How long is this? This is a little over an hour. And what you see on the top here are the stereo tracks for the album. And I have an Atmos master file, which is exactly this length, but is one continuous piece of music. It hasn't been broken up into tracks yet. Breaking up the tracks for stereo was pretty easy. All I had to do is find out where that marker was and make a cut. You don't have to have Pro Tools to use this, but I'll show you what we do in Pro Tools, which is we take your stereo cuts, select that track, you do export session info as text, and you choose just the file list, and you choose just the track EDL and just that selected track. These settings here are all settings that Immersive Master Pro can read. So you hit OK, and you make a TXT file. Let's go over to Immersive Master Pro, and I'll show you what I mean. So here's a TXT file that came from Pro Tools, and I'm just going to hit the space bar so we can take a glance at it. It's kind of messy, but it shows clip name, start time, end time, duration. And then here is my recorded Atmos master file, which I recorded into the renderer. I like using the external renderer, but you can also do this with an ADM file that you might get from the internal renderer in Logic or in Pro Tools. And I'll drag and drop. This is the whole album. This is not cut into tracks. So it says album there. I'll drag and drop that into edit mode. So in edit mode in Immersive Master Pro, you can only load up one master file. But the power of edit mode is that I can take this messy EDL from Pro Tools and drag and drop it onto here, and all my tracks from Pro Tools are now here in Immersive Master Pro. And what I find interesting about this is that while it's calculating loudness, it's calculating loudness for a virtual track, one that hasn't actually been exported yet. And if you want to change the length of a track, you can double click here and using the time code, change start and end time. And then all the same outputs are available to you when you go to process. So this was the very first thing we did is I want it to be 7 different tracks and I want 7 ADMs, and here's where the cuts. And if you hit continue and output, it will automatically make 7 ADM files for you, cut at exactly those frame edges. And then one of the most important things, and I've been working in Atmos for a while, when streaming started, we didn't have gapless playback, but we do now, and it sounds great. And Immersive Master Pro will guarantee that you get gapless playback on the music platforms if your end frame is the same as your start frame of the next track. So we fill to the end of frame 6. The start is at the end of, we fill to the end of the frame before frame 6, and then we start at frame 6 for the next track. Do what the application does. It does it right, not me.
That's great. Quick question, Nathaniel. If in the case, with using any application, a lot of the times the user is the error.
Yes.
So if you've exported this text file, let's say from Pro Tools, and you've got all your track marker locations and everything's fine, but you happen to drop an incorrect, the wrong ADM. So the length of time is longer or even shorter. Is there anything that the app will kind of let you know in terms of there's a mismatch between what you have from the DL export?
We actually have 2 things happening here. If you define tracks in this mode that are that start too early or go too long, we're just going to add silence, right? So we're going to say, so for instance, if this one, the very last track of the album, the producer says, hey, I want a couple more seconds of silence at the end before the end of the file, I can just tick that up and say, okay, great, done. And Immersive Master Pro will automatically fill silence to that because it goes beyond the end of the master file that's loaded. And the same happens at the front. If you define time that is completely out of the range of the time code of the original master file, you'll get an error. So the application will say, hey, wait a minute, you're doing something that is going to be only silence, so we shouldn't do that for you. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of touch on, Pro Tools is not the only thing out there, and I wanted this to be useful to people who are working in a lot of different workstations. So I'm going to reset edit mode here, and we're going to go back to where we have this Atmos master file loaded, and we have no event list in the main window. If I go to any spreadsheet application, so I've got numbers loaded, but it works with Excel and it works with Google Sheets, and I have in the first column the clip name, start time, end time, duration, right? I can just copy and paste that in the macOS clipboard. Hit Command-C, go to Immersive Master Pro, hit Command-V. So if you're working in Logic or you're working in Pyramix or one of these other applications, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to take advantage of the same feature. You just have to type your timecode values into a spreadsheet application. And we actually also support CSV files, so the comma-separated value. If you've got a text file with comma-separated values or tab-delimited files, as long as you get all 4 of those fields going, Immersive Master Pro will be able to read it, and you should be able to get in there okay.
This is super useful. I mean, really, really helpful. I also like the fact that, just from edit mode, you can kind of go into, you can then kind of go into your batch mode kind of directly from edit mode, it seems, just by, after you've kind of got everything loaded and set up the way you need to, you can go right to process. Yeah,
originally we were thinking that files would leave here and go to batch mode, and then it became obvious to us that if we know the track start and end, even if we haven't cut the ADM, because we know the track start and end, we can still calculate the integrated loudness and the dB true peak value. Now, for people who are viewing, you got to be super aware, if I change this time and I want to make this track a minute longer, that might have a different loudness level because you might be in a different place in the music, right? So wherever you define those tracks, you're going to have a different integrated level for that kind of virtual track. And then it stops being a virtual track when we go to process and export, an ADM or any of the re-renders that you want to have exported. I find this really useful at the end of a project because I never know if somebody's going to ask me for a 714 instead of an ADM. A lot of my clients really like the sound of stereo direct and binaural. So even if they haven't asked for it today, I'll often just check these off and stick it in a folder. And that way, when they do ask for it, I can say, yeah, great, no problem. It's here, ready to go. And then obviously, when we do this, we hit continue. Find a destination for this. And what you'll see is we get processing numbers here on the right-hand side. And then we get a kind of global processing value down here. And if you hover over that, you can hit cancel in the middle of the job. And then we get a percentage total over here on the bottom as Immersive Master Pro works through all those output formats.
Really useful, super helpful. I mean, this is fantastic, Nathaniel. So, I know this is now out in the wild, and I'm, just where can folks find it and, find it for demo, for purchase?
ImmersiveMasterPro.com. Our company name is Immersive Machines, but ImmersiveMasterPro.com has all the information. It's got videos. You can download a 30-day free trial. You can email me and my partners. We're working quickly right now, and we're very open to hearing from our users about what kind of workflows they have and what kind of needs they have. And we're working on a couple features right now, which are features that, people have been asking for us for the last couple of months.
Nice. I mean, this is really cool. Thank you for sharing that. It's a really, efficient and powerful solution to accomplish these tasks. And it's cool because it kind of combines functions that are, certainly unique to Immersive Master Pro with things that existing tools or our tools or DAWs can do some of separately, but not all in the same app, and definitely not multiple files in a batch. So it's a really cool solution that I think people will really find helpful to use in addition to the existing tools and that they're already familiar with. So just a really, really nice solution and great demonstration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that.
So we will now move on to Q&A. Please submit your questions for Nathaniel and Greg, and we'll be right back for that. All right, let's jump into Q&A with Nathaniel, Greg, and also joining us, mix and mastering engineer, Zach Szydlo. What's up, Zach? Thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely. My pleasure, man.
You want to share just a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. I switched over to doing Atmos full time, a little less than probably about 3 years ago. I was the Atmos guy at Sterling for just under 3 years. And yeah, now I'm doing Atmos mixing full time. Last couple projects I did were Demi Lovato, did Leve, who's brilliant and amazing. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing.
Right on. Well, thanks for being here. Great to have you. Thank you to everybody who has pre-submitted questions and those that submitted them during the session. We answered many of them back during the session itself via text. So thank you for those. If you have additional questions now, please enter your name along with them so that we can address you specifically. All right, Greg, to you first. You shared part 3 of your Creating an Atmos and Stereo Direct Pro Tips session, and you've got some downloads now available for folks.
I do, yeah. So as promised, so yeah, thanks, Ben. As promised, and now that we've kind of wrapped up our 3-part series of Creating an Atmos and taking everything from the inception of the song all the way to the delivery with and then being able to get our stereo deliverable using Stereo Direct 2.0. I wanted to make that session available to everyone. So there's a Dropbox link, which I'll pop up into the chat here in just a second. So there are a few different things, and this is going to increase over time. So currently there's a Pro Tools session, there's a Logic Pro session, and there is a folder with just the stems, which I've separated by bed tracks and object tracks. Now, it's a very small session. If you remember, it's only about 8 or so tracks. And these sessions are meant really as a starting point, a place for you to experiment without messing up any of your own work. So a couple things you'll notice in the sessions. One, on the Pro Tools session, there's some automation that's written for panning on the object. Feel free to just go crazy, change things around, pull stuff off the wall in terms of the bed tracks, just experiment. With the Logic Pro, there's no automation in there at all, but things are separated so that there's one specific object track. I'll go ahead and I'll be adding Steinberg sessions for Nuendo, etc., Persona Studio One, and others as I get them done. So let me go ahead and throw the link in the chat here, and happy holidays.
Awesome. There you go.
Thanks, Greg.
From Greg Claus. And also, folks, for the replay, we'll be sure to put a QR code up on the screen. So we'll pop the link into the live viewers. And for the replay, we will put a QR up on the screen. Grab those files from Greg. All right, Greg, another quick one for you. So in addition to the Atmos knowledge-based article that we shared off the top of this session, there's also been a new FAQ document posted in the knowledge base that explores the question, why should I mix with dynamic objects when I could use a 714 or 916 track? Do you want to elaborate on that one a little bit? And I'll pop the link to that in as well.
Yeah, so big thanks to Jordan Glasgow and his team for creating this document. It's a really nice compendium when you take the music creation doc, and this one was really meant to just really provide some information on some of the positives, some of the benefits of leveraging dynamic objects. And just for a little bit of clarification, a dynamic object specifically just means an object that is not living specifically within an object bed. So I know when we think dynamic, we start thinking about things maybe moving and automation. Not necessarily. It just basically means it's an object that does not live in the object bed. Now there are some really great positives there. We're not being prescriptive. We're not telling you not to leverage object beds only if you so choose, but we do want to make sure that you have all the great information on why dynamic objects exist and what are some of the benefits. So I'll go ahead and throw that link here as well. And it's a really great read, and thanks to Jordan and team again for that one.
Yep, huge shout out to Jordan and team as always. All right, keeping you on the hot seat for a minute here, Greg, from Aurora. We've touched on this one in previous sessions, but let's just kind of give the top level answer to it here again. And the question is, why doesn't Dolby change the format to at least a 714 or 916 bed rather than the 712 where it begins?
So I'll put on my developer's hat. Obviously, I'm not a developer here at Dolby, but I have been a software developer for a long time. And a lot of that really has to do with as the needs change in the industry and in the market, we certainly want to address that. When Atmos was conceived, there was a very specific certain amount of how object beds and channel widths that were being used specifically in cinema. We wanted to be able to maximize the usage of all of that. We were also contending with CPUs and RAM usage at the time. Now, will things change? It's quite possible. Will they change right now? I cannot give a specific date, but just know that Dolby's always listening. We're taking a look at exactly how Dolby Atmos is being leveraged and how channel widths are being leveraged. So never say never, and we'll continue to look at it. But I do appreciate you sending that question in.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. All right, Nathaniel and Zach, over to you for one. And Greg, if you'd like to chime in on this one as well. Edward asks, what's your approach to bass management to get the fullness and cohesiveness that can be lost in an immersive mix or master when coming from a stereo mix? And we do have some sessions dedicated to this, but I'll hand it to you guys for your take.
Yeah, I'm going to punt this one to Zach because I typically find that my Atmos mixes, I am controlling bass from getting to be too much. So I typically have the opposite problem. But Zach, you've got a lot of experience on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, right, assuming your stereo mix sounds great, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, especially if you're really intentional with your decisions. I know this kind of sounds like a little bit of a sidetrack, but it's really not, right? If you're paying attention to what's where and making sure everything hits together and hits in the way that it should, like it does in stereo, if you have a proper monitoring system and you're not slamming a bunch of low end into your LFE and trying to build the bass out of your LFE, I usually don't really run into that problem too much. I mean, the rare exception would be, if someone slammed a 2-bus, and now obviously we're not going into 2-bus, but generally it's all the just sort of standard good practices. combined with not misusing the LFE. That's really it. I wish I had a more in-depth answer there, but
that's a perfect answer, Zach.
All right, Greg, one for you from Brian. Could you please explain a quick binaural headphone mix on Pro Tools?
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here quickly. Let me push some stuff here in the background. Nobody needs to see
Brian
it.
gets a live, and the rest of the folks, a live demonstration.
It's not really a demo, is it? Really? Woo! All right. Let's see here. All right, we're going to do...
Yeah, while Greg is setting up his screen, I will mention that I'm super impressed with Pro Tools putting the binaural distance modes into the view on the track.
Well, that's exactly what that's exactly
that's a killer. I know we're here to talk about Immersive Master Pro, but let's thank Avid for doing this. This is a really nice. This is a nice feature.
Yeah. So you actually stole the thunder there, Nathaniel.
Sorry, Greg.
That's actually no, but it's perfect. So when the internal renderer launched, internal rendering launched in Pro Tools in 2023.12, it was very confusing for folks to figure out how they can kind of leverage binaural settings using internal rendering. So in 2024.6, what Avid went ahead and they've actually brought it right directly into the edit arrange window. You can see here on this track, your binaural settings are literally right there, right underneath. Whether it's a better object, you can select now off, near, mid, far. It's that simple. Now, if you're still working on 2023.12, you will not see that. So you've got to be on 2024.6. or now 2024.10. And it's really that simple.
Perfect. Thank you. Greg, one more for you. This is a in-depth a question that could have a very in-depth answer, but let's just hit it from a high level. From Sound Suresh, how to enhance multi-track mixing from 5.1 to immersive?
Yeah, and of course, Zach and Nathaniel, feel free to jump in. For me, it's a really good question because I hadn't mixed in Atmos. I came from stereo. I had done a couple of projects in 5.1, which is how I kind of got my feet wet in terms of mixing surround, which was really helpful when moving into the immersive space and specifically Dolby Atmos. So, I mean, there are lots of different ways to kind of think about it. One approach is kind of thinking about an object bed and thinking about that as your 5.1. That's where things normally would have been, and then having your dynamic objects, which kind of calling back to this document that Jordan and team wrote, leveraging dynamic objects outside of that object bed when you want to do some things in the heights, or maybe you want to have some movement for certain things. I think the one thing I just want to make sure to mention here, I think is the most important thing when kind of transitioning a mix from 5.1 or stereo, or specifically 5.1 into Atmos, is remember that 5.1 is a surround format and it is speaker dependent. Dolby Atmos, and when you're in an immersive space, the amount of speakers, while is really impressive and great, the work you're doing there it's not specifically speaker dependent. So meaning that if you're mixing and maybe you're in a 916 room and then you happen to take that mix into a 714 or even a 5.1 room or even a stereo room, things will scale accordingly, even though you're technically missing those speakers. I think that's the most important thing to kind of consider. And Zach, Nathaniel, I don't know if you anything you wanted to add.
Just quickly, I will say, if you have a good existing 5.1 mix and you're relying on reverbs, as soon as you switch those reverbs to immersive reverbs, you are halfway there, right? Depending on the content. But if you take advantage of those channels in that space, you'll get there fast. And that's why I think immersive reverbs are so important in our work right now.
All right. Nathaniel, we'll stick with you and Zach for a few here, starting with Paul from Essex. How can one use Atmos to differentiate a song in the soundtrack from those audio elements which relate to things visible in the picture?
Actually, I'm mixing a TV show right now, which has a live orchestra and a lot of singers. It's a children's television show. And actually, it was just announced. This is the new Wonder Pets on Apple TV Plus.
Nice.
And all the characters are singing, and there's wall-to-wall live music happening. And I guess the short version of a much longer answer is that when the individual singers on screen are objects and they're moving around, they're singing in harmony and they're moving around the screen, you get a lot more dimensionality when you put on the headphones or when you're in front of the speakers, right? And so that makes the effort of Atmos worthwhile. I hope that's answering the question. But I feel like, especially, if you're listening to spatial audio, I'll do the mix and then I'll check the spatial audio mix, and it has a lot more dimension and things are really attached to the screen in a way that's more physical, So that's an exciting thing for me, based on the same show playing back in stereo. Yeah.
All right, great. From our buddy Sam, Nathaniel, and Zach, do you have any tools and tips in the DAW that you use, and do you use other DAWs? Do you work with the external renderer or internal, and do you prefer one or the other, or find any differences between the two?
I'm going to interrupt Zach for a minute before he answers, because he'll have a smarter answer. But there's one big reason I use the external renderer a lot, which is that I tend to work on long programs, and I can punch in. So I had this happen yesterday where somebody told me the intro of something wasn't quite right and it needed to be fixed, and it was an hour and a half long program. And with the external renderer, I can actually, because it runs a .atmos master file, I can go in there and punch in, punch out cleanly. And I think the internal renderer in Pro Tools is super well designed, but that one feature alone makes me use the external a little bit more frequently. So, but Zach, what's your take on that?
I'm still totally on the external renderer. I've used the internal renderer, the studio I go to, not use it, and it seems to work great. For me, it's a couple things. Number one, honestly, the biggest one is I haven't had time where I had nothing ongoing, and I don't want to change up my system. So much of what I get has super tight deadlines. I can't afford to now mess up or change the workflow. That's like probably the biggest part of it. The second sort of back half of that is I find that it just interfaces really, really well. I'm still going to use the external renderer to create my MP4s. And then the last one is I do like, especially for like sequence movement, I like the Dolby Music Planner, and I can be really effective in the right spot. So yeah, for me, I'm still on the external. As far as the question about Pro Tools specific tips, not really. Just continue. I think the biggest thing, like, kind of exaggerate. I think with any session, right, like file organization, labeling, all your prep work is super important. I think it's that much more important, especially, if you're dealing with 50, 60, 70, however many, different sources. And it's not just left and right. There's routings, all these things happening. I think it's so important to have all of your prep work done ahead. That's always true, but just like incrementally more so.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to combine a few of these. Jesse and Keith, headphone mixing questions. Zach and Nathaniel, are you finding any common settings for your use of the binaural, near, mid, and far settings that translate best to streaming platforms?
No, it's totally case dependent to me.
It's case dependent. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but for those of you who haven't already listened to, if you listen to the output of the renderer or the output of the internal renderer in Pro Tools in the binaural mode, you're listening to something which is very similar to Dolby's AC4. And that's how you would hear music on Tidal and Amazon. And if you listen to the output of binaural renderer for Apple Music, you're listening to spatial audio. So I think this is a long conversation. We could spend an hour on that one. But I think if you are preparing a lot of content, you got to listen to both. And I listen to both every day.
I will say my one thing I kind of having done a decent amount of Atmos mastering, don't be afraid of any of the settings, right? So like they're all there for a reason. So like there are times like don't be afraid to say, oh, you know what? I think this one should be off. That's fine. Granted, you shouldn't have everything off. Like pick your spots. By the same notion, like don't be afraid to set something to far, right? Like you have. I feel like I've seen a lot of stuff where it was like all either off or one setting, and then they'll pick like one thing and it's set to far. It's like those can make a pretty drastic difference. Like don't be afraid of them. They're there for a reason. Like you can really lean into stuff and get a lot of depth.
I hear a lot of mixes that are all set to mid, and there's kind of it gets a little gray and a little amorphous. It's like, hey, you missed some opportunities. It's kind of like you haven't used all the colors in the toolkit. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, give me a few more colors here, because right now I'm just hearing blue. Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed.
Use the tools that are there and available to you. Make as many creative decisions as you can, and having everything set to off or mid may not even allow it to pass through some QC processes at different levels. So use what you've got there. All right, let's get into some specific items. Quick fire round to the software. Nathaniel, how is the Immersive Master Pro tool different than the album assembler? Is there a time advantage to get loudness readings from this tool compared to the album assembler?
Yeah, so there is, I will admit, there's a little bit of overlap between the Dolby Atmos album assembler and Immersive Master Pro. Where Immersive Master Pro really excels is that it can load .atmos files and ADMs. The album assembler only loads ADMs. We also do batch loudness. So if you have an album with 25 tracks and you want to find out the loudness of each track, with all due respect to Dolby, that's a very tedious process in the Dolby Atmos album assembler. If it takes you a couple, 2 or 3 hours to do that, you may as well have done that in Immersive Master Pro because it's one click over there. Also, when you leave the application, the album assembler is designed to make an ADM for you. Immersive Master Pro can do the ADM, it can do the sample rate conversion, which the album assembler does not do. And it can also do all the re-renders. So in a situation where you want to stereo direct, you want a binaural or a 5.1, it's a lot of extra tedious steps, sample rate conversion and re-renders to go through the Dolby Atmos album assembler. So we find Immersive Master Pro to be much more efficient, sort of getting from, hey, my mix is done to, hey, my mix is actually delivered to the clients and is now streaming. So, but they're both good tools, and credit to Dolby for making the album assembler because it does some cool things.
Awesome. Well, we got a question that has parts to it, some of which you just answered. The person did not submit their name, but I'm just going to go into the ones that really haven't been answered yet. How is this application on CPU while all of the re-renders are happening? That's part one. And then how does it manage gains to fit spec, and how does limiting work and trim as it pertains to how it operates Pro Tools?
So we are light on CPU right now. We designed this so that you can run it in the background and keep your mix going in the foreground without it destroying your computer, right? So you'll find on almost any computer that we're using a couple cores and you're going to be fine. And also you'll notice that if you do loudness, we're actually faster than the renderer is for analyzing loudness. The way the renderer is doing re-renders the sound of our re-renders are bit for bit identical with the renderer, but the way we hit the threads is a little bit different. So you may see some difference there, just the way that the renderer is coded versus Immersive Master Pro. Then jumping over to the trims, and I think we had a couple questions about this. This is version 1 of Immersive Master Pro, and what we're doing with loudness is we're making sure that things that are too high and out of spec, we will turn down and put them into spec. We intentionally did not code autocorrect loudness to raise levels because there's no limiter in Immersive Master Pro. So if it automatically did that, there's the potential to automatically clip your output. It go past the dB true peak. Now, you can do it manually. So if you have a file in Immersive Master Pro and you say, you know what, I want that to be raised 2 dB, you can just double click on the gain there and hit +2 or arrow up, and you can change that. So we'll do gain up and down. We haven't coded gain auto up just because I thought it was a little risky. I didn't want people making clips masters. That said, we're definitely looking at this, and we're listening to limiters right now and looking at the future. So.
Great. Hopefully that answers Martine's question. Another question that was in there as well. We got time for 2 more. Over to you, Zach, for one from Glenn. When you mix a high-profile album such as Demi Lovato, are you mixing from scratch or repurposing stems?
So Demi's kind of unique, but generally speaking, when I can, I'll speak to the engineer, and it's sort of a split somewhere in between multi-tracks and stems. If I have 10 stems to make an Atmos mix, I'm limited with what I can do. I've done it, no problem, done less. But it's sort of like a fine balance, right? So with something like that, where you might have a bunch of plugins and a ton of bus processing on the drums, I'll make sure that I have a stereo print of the drum bus. If I have 10 synth layers, I don't just want a synth stem, right? There's a lot I can do with that. So I'll have them sort of split up. So it's kind of like splitting the difference there, and just referencing Stereo Master.
Great, thank you. All right, last one for you, Nathaniel, from James. To confirm, is there no way to hear the audio directly from Immersive Master Pro? Does it need to go through the external renderer like the album assembler? And if not, is this a feature that will be coming in the future?
Yeah, so we are definitely thinking about this feature. Right now, Immersive Master Pro doesn't do playback. And a lot of the reason that's the case is because we want to do playback right, which means doing it to whatever your speaker configuration is. So right now, it's very much a utility application and not a playback application. When you leave Immersive Master Pro, if you want to QC something, you can put it in the external renderer or the Dolby reference player if you have something like that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you to all of the guests here today, Nathaniel Reichman, Zach Szydlo, my partner, Greg Stryke, Chin, as always. Thank you so much to all of the attendees for the amazing questions. And with that, we'll wrap this session. Thank you, everybody.